Good evening. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening to you. All right. Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome, welcome, welcome to Black Table Talk during Dialogues Edition. I'm your host tonight, Shantae Charles. Listen, please share this out because you're going to want to hear tonight. We are taking a break from our regular reading, but oh my, is all I have to say for tonight. So come on in, bring your aunties and your uncles and your nieces and your nephews. Come on in, come on in, come on in. We are going to be sharing tonight some words about this holiday, the one that's coming up. But I want to talk to us tonight about our ancestors' history with this holiday, which is why I entitled or subtitled this Revolt or Rest. So I'm going to dig in. We're going to look at some stories on tonight. And then I'm going to close out. So I hope that this will be informative. And I hope you will learn something that you maybe didn't know about this particular time of year. For those of you who are with me for the first time, my name is Shantae Charles. I am an artivist, educator, singer, songwriter, author, amongst other things. So tonight, let's start out with this holiday, Christmas. Around the 1830s, during that time, large slaveholding states like Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, these were some of the first states in the United States to declare Christmas as an actual state holiday. But this holiday was a holiday that slave owners or owners of the enslaved actually feared rebellion. And so, because of that, they would have what they call these kind of like preemptive shows of harsh discipline in order to sort of deter our ancestors from making any fast moves. And so, during this time, buying and selling of the enslaved did not stop. As a matter of fact, New Year's Day was referred to as Heartbreak Day because a lot of the enslaved were being sold off on that day, permanently separated from their loved ones. So, what we tend to see as like a celebration time for a lot of those who were enslaved, a lot of our ancestors, it was either a time of rest or it was a time to plot a revolt. Some of them use the time off to plot escapes, which is what we're going to be really focusing on tonight. During this time, owners would give things that they generally had otherwise held off on giving, things that were necessary to life and survival that they had withheld for the entire year. They would use this time to like actually kind of make up for what they were doing. Good evening to everyone. And so they would give things like shoes, they would give clothing, they would sometimes even give money. And the children during this time were given either candy or they were given sacks of pennies. And so it was very paternalistic in nature. It's like, okay, you're going to take this one time out of the year to quote unquote be kind. But what you were actually doing was the bare necessities of what you should have been doing in the first place. So one of the more famous escapes during this time was in 1848. Ellen and William Craft, they were a couple who crafted their escape to Philly from Macon, Georgia. So that was one of the, you probably have heard maybe of that particular escape. But tonight we're going to talk about Harriet Tubman. And before I get into that, as I was reading about some of the traditions of this time, I found it very, very interesting because I ran into something that I know about culturally, but reading a white writer try to explain what I know culturally they were referring to was very disconcerting. So this is what they were talking about. They were talking about that amongst the Christmas celebrations, there was a celebration that actually started in Wilmington, North Carolina. Now, my family, my mom was born in Wilmington, North Carolina, and a lot of my maternal side of my family is out of North Carolina. So when this writer started talking about this, I was like, they have no idea what they're talking about. Like they messed it up. So I'm hopefully going to try to correct some of what I read by sharing with you what they were talking about and then giving you the actual explanation of what they were trying to say. So they talked about this festival that was created amongst the enslaved out of Wilmington, North Carolina. And the writer called it a celebration called John Coonering. And I was like, what are y'all talking about? John Coonering? What is this? And I'm like, I've never heard of that. So then they started breaking the words down and they said John Coonering. And then they said some of them call it John Canoe, where the enslaved would dress in wild costumes and they went singing from house to house. And they would expect to, as they went around the neighborhood singing and celebrating, wearing wild costumes and going from house to house, that they would receive gifts. I was like, wait a minute. This is not called no John Coonering. What is these people? What are they talking about? They're actually talking about the Junkanoo. And if you're from South Florida or you have Caribbean heritage or you have Bahamian heritage, you know exactly what the Junkanoo are. I was like, oh my gosh, they have butchered our history. There is no such thing as John Coonering, okay? It's called the Junkanoo. And again, if you're from South Florida, you know about, right, you know about the Goombay Festival that happens every year in Coconut Grove, which they actually moved that festival from the poorer part of of Coconut Grove to the more wealthier side. So they have again hijacked one of our festivals. And now I think you can't even get into the festival without paying. It used to just be in Coconut Grove, it used to be just one long strip of a road, and it would go on for several days. And it's the Goombay Festival, and there would be food out there for you to buy. There would be games, there would be music, and the Junkanoo would come through the festival in their wild costumes, dancing and praising. Now, this is actually recorded in Harriet Jacobs' book, The Incident in the Life of a Slave Girl. So this is a tradition that does have its roots not only in Caribbean culture, but it also has its roots here in the United States in the enslaved culture out of Wilmington, North Carolina, which I find very interesting because a lot of now North Carolinians and South Carolinians and even Georgians actually wound up going further down south, which is where a lot of our relatives ended up. And they were still carrying on these traditions and practices. So it's actually called the Junkanoo. So I'm probably going to write that writer and make sure they understand that this is not called John Coonering. This is actually the Junkanoo that they're referring to. Now, back to Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman set out from Philadelphia to The Maryland Eastern Shore, which is actually where I am located now. So I have been enjoying getting to know this part of Maryland. After she heard that her three brothers were going to be sold the day after Christmas. So that's what we're actually about to get into now. Harriet hears this, and we're reading from the book She Came to Slay. If you want a medium tempo, a book that's, readable for maybe your young readers, I would probably say middle school to, upper to adult. This is a great book on Harriet Tubman. The writing is very simple, but it is detailed and it does get the point across. So I'm reading from page 58 out of the book, and the section is called Who You Gonna Call? Her brothers, Harriet's brothers, were habitual escapees. It had been 5 years at this point since Harriet first left Maryland. And during those years, all three of her brothers had made repeated attempts to escape, and none of them were successful. Ben and Henry must have regretted their decision to give in to fear back in 1849. If they had followed their sister's lead, if they had traveled with her to Philadelphia, they would have avoided the past 5 years of enslavement and the beatings that inevitably accompanied every unsuccessful attempt for them to flee. Over the years, the situation grew more dangerous for Harriet's brothers, and as the winter months of 1854 approached, everything came to a head. The Broadus widow was tired of the Ross brothers and their repeated attempts at escape. So she decided to sell the three siblings during the Christmas holidays. As there was little time to spare, Harriet had sent a letter to Jacob Jackson, a free black man in Dorchester County. In the letter, Harriet embedded hidden messages to her brothers stating that they should be prepared and ready to step aboard when the good old ship of Zion comes along. Although the letter was inspected by the postal authorities, it raised no suspicions, and Harriet was able to get news to her brothers that she would soon come to their rescue. She planned their escape carefully, choosing Christmas Day for their departure. This was the most opportune time for the brothers to escape, as the pace of work over the holiday was often slowed, allowing the enslaved to visit and celebrate the holy holiday with one another. This fleeting Christmas joy was often followed by mass slave sales at the beginning of the year. As we said, it became known as Heartbreak Day. Sales that would eradicate whatever debt the enslavers had accumulated that year, and in this case, the Broadus debts continued to mount. The siblings were to meet at her parents' cabin, and from there, Harriet, her brothers, and a small number of enslaved friends would begin their journey out of slavery. Family history reports that Harriet and her brothers had their father blindfolded and brought to them as they waited in a nearby building. Harriet's father was blindfolded so that if asked whether he had seen his children, he could honestly answer no. Harriet had not laid eyes on her father for 5 years, and for a few glorious moments, she had an opportunity to talk to her daddy. It's easy to imagine that she promised to return for him one day, but in that moment, she had to save her brothers from certain and immediate danger. As for her mother, the siblings decided it was best not to involve her, however painful. They took hold of their father's arms, and he accompanied them some miles upon their journey. They then bade him farewell and left him standing blindfolded in the middle of the road. When he could no longer hear their footsteps, he took off the handkerchief and turned back. Over the next few days, Harriet and her party made their way to Wilmington, Delaware, and connected with Underground Station Master Thomas Garrett. He provided Harriet and her companions with new shoes because they had worn their shoes off their feet. Once they had eaten and rested, they were sent to a home in Chester County, Pennsylvania, and from there they were shuttled to William Still's office in Philadelphia. From 1849 to 1860, Harriet continued to risk her life for the sake of her family and loved ones who remained in slavery's grasp. Of the 13 trips she made back to Maryland, each one was demanding and tested her will and resolve in new ways. Aside from avoiding slave catchers, Harriet had to boost the confidence and tenacity of the fugitives, convincing them to stay the course should their commitment waver. It was difficult to escort a large party of runaways through the swamps and mountains, but that was often how Harriet conducted business. She always led her expeditions at night, using the stars to guide her in the dark woods, trying desperately to avoid the dangers of nighttime travel. Accidentally stepping on a copperhead snake could be deadly, and coyotes and wolves made their presence known as they hunted for prey. Harriet carried a pistol for protection, and she wasn't afraid to use it on a wild animal, a slave catcher, or a renegade runaway. So, again, Christmas was either used as a time of rest or a time of revolt or escape. So I'm going to ask you this Christmas, what are you using your Christmas time for? Because there are still systems of enslavement happening even as we speak, right? Are you using your time as a time of rest to plan, or are you making your great escapes during the holidays? People are making their great escape from jobs that are holding them like slave masters. People are making their great escapes from lots of things during this season. So I just put that question out there. What are you doing with your holiday season? This book actually comes from the African American Museum of History and Culture from the Smithsonian. I have been there several times and I have led some tours there. So if you're ever in the area, you can reach out to me for a guided tour and I will be happy to guide you for a price. This is what's actually in the museum there. This is the Tubman Collection. And it says, born and enslaved in Maryland, brave Harriet Tubman, 1822 to 1913, escaped to the North, but soon made the first of 13 trips back to her native state, smuggling scores of family members and friends to freedom. During the Civil War, she led a raid that liberated 700 enslaved people. You don't often hear about that. You hear about the 300 people that she freed during her lifetime, but a lot of people don't talk about this Civil War raid where 700 enslaved people were freed at one time. So this is Queen Victoria, who had admired Harriet Tubman's audacity, actually sent her this silk lace shawl around 1897. So that came from the Queen. Just bringing it a little closer for you. And then we have here a portrait of Harriet Tubman that was taken about 1908 in Auburn, New York. And then finally, although she could neither read nor write, Harriet Tubman was intensely devout and would have prized this, which was her personal hymnal. Again, this hymnal is located in the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. Finally, let's move on to another holiday celebration that was created, because we know that everybody does not celebrate the birth of Christ. And so Maulana Karenga, founded Kwanzaa to restore and reaffirm African heritage and culture. Kwanzaa originated from the Kiswahili phrase Matunda ya Kwanzaa and is interpreted as first fruits. The additional A was added to indicate that the holiday has its roots in African American culture. Many regard the celebration as the most important holiday on the African American calendar. Although the celebration coincides with the Christmas season, it was not intended as a religious celebration or one that promotes ideologies. Instead, it focuses on family values, things that you should be building with your family. Each night, for 7 nights, one particular family value is celebrated. These are Umojo, which is unity, Kuji Kajulia, I'm saying that wrong, self-determination, that's the one that always stumps me in pronunciation. Ujima, collective work and responsibility. Ujama, cooperative economics. Nia, purpose. And Kumba, creativity. and the last Imani, or faith. Karenga was a writer, educator, and advocate of Black culturalism. He was born Ronald McKinley Everett in Parsonsburg, Maryland, the son of a Baptist minister. In the late 1950s, he moved to California and studied at the Los Angeles City College, where he was the first Black elected president of the student body. He graduated with a bachelor's degree and later received his master's and doctorate from the University of California. After completing his education, he embraced the Black Power movement and supported Malcolm X. To help restore order in Los Angeles after the 1965 riots, he helped to establish the Black Congress for the residents of Watts. By the mid-1960s, Everett changed his name to Maulana Karenga. He also started a group known as US that had its goal in liberation for Black people. The holiday Kwanzaa has been called his most important legacy. All right. So that is what I wanted to share with you all tonight. If you would like to join me to respond to what I have shared, if you would like to come on screen, just let me know in the comment section and I will bring you on. For my listeners by Anchor.fm, this has been another Black Table Talk during Dialogues, and I hope that you have a wonderful holiday season with your family. I hope that you're blessed, that you have love, joy, peace, goodness, gentleness, meekness, self-control at that table, and that you really and truly enjoy your holiday season. Remember, it's either a time of rest or a time to plan your revolt. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
How are you?
I'm up here in the cold weather again. I'm in South Carolina again.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And man, it's been cold here. But it's amazing. Well, this is a problem that you and I both know about. When you get white folks trying to do our history, they mess it up.
I was like, Pastor Ben, I was like, what in the entire world? How do you get John Coonering from Junkanoo?
Like, we know about Junkanoo right here in South Florida.
Right. I was like, what are y'all talking about? So that was really amazing to me. That was like the thing that I learned, right? That I didn't know the Junkanoo was actually recorded in an enslaved narrative, and that it was something that was going on in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is where my mom is from. So it was very interesting for me because it was like I was connecting the pieces, and the fact that they said that was a part of what they would do during Christmas time. So rather than do the other things that was going on, the old Saint Nick and all of that, our people were doing, these celebrations and honoring their own cultural practices during that time. And I don't think that is talked about enough, in terms of what else were we doing. I'm sure, yes, we were celebrating Christ, a lot of us, but what else were we doing to maintain our cultural traditions through it all, And as I was reading, it was like the slave masters knew that this was happening as well, and they didn't stop it. They felt like, oh, as long as they're kind of celebrating and joyful and happy, right, we're not going to bother that. Mm-hmm. But while they were also celebrating and joyful and happy, some of them were also using that time to plan to get out of Dodge, which I can appreciate. And the fact that our ancestors were wise enough to know that, yes, they're giving us downtime for us to be joyful and eat and, kind of not think about the state that we're in perpetually, but some of them had enough sense to know this is an opportune time, like Harriet rescuing her brothers on Christmas Day. This is an opportune time for escape. So I think that that's very important for us to note. Your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah. Now let's talk. Yeah, now let's talk about Harriet. Excuse me, because as you said, everybody know about the 300, but the 700 is like they tried to keep that, on the low.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't want y'all to know that this woman was a part of freeing 1,000 slaves.
Right.
It's okay for the 300.
Right.
But we don't want the
700 during the Civil War times. Like, I don't know anybody who's been talking about that. I've always heard, because I've even been to the actual museum that's here in Maryland. It's like an Underground Railroad museum that has, more things about her. But I don't see anything about a raid during the Civil War, that she led a raid during the Civil War and liberated 700 enslaved people at one time. I didn't see that there. And you know me, I like to go around to every board and read every little piece of everything and look at all the pictures. They have pictures there of her brothers and all of that. I didn't see that. Noted. So that was something else that I learned. I knew about the 300, but I didn't know she had led a raid during the Civil War and freed 700 people at one time. Mm-hmm. Like, where's her Presidential Medal of Honor posthumously?
Right. Now they did. Right. Now they did let us know that she did lead soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
But they never let us know that it led to a raid which freed 700 people.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's half the story.
So, they at that point you can see that they deliberately left that out.
Right. We actually need to be calling her General Tubman. Because think about it. How many wars, right, has there been where that many people are rescued at one time? Let's just talk about military history. Like, give her props. That's what I'm saying. Give her props. All of them. And I love this book. Again, this is a really good book if you want kind of a solid history on Harriet, but you want to order it for, maybe your child is, I would say, 10 years up and older, middle school to high school to even young adult, because it does have like graphic pictures and images. But I love this page because it says say her name, and it's got all of the different kind of names that she was called. So like I said, General Tubman. Okay? They know what to call her. Mother Tubman, a black she-Moses, Harriet Tubman Davis, Harriet Tubman Mentee, and her original name was Araminta Ross. So we need to give her props. We need to really give her props in a real way. But yeah, that's all I had to share on tonight. Yeah. Any closing words, Pastor Ben?
Well, we need to reclaim our history.
Yeah.
We need to reclaim our history. We need to search it out for ourselves. Know what we did as a people.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, when they write about it, they're going to deliberately leave some stuff out.
Yeah.
See, and they're going to twist it to fit their narrative.
Yeah, because when I looked up the Junkanoo, it said that it was a Bahamian cultural tradition, and I'm like, okay, it is a Bahamian cultural tradition, but who has tracked it from how did it become a Bahamian cultural tradition to how did it find its way to Wilmington, North Carolina, of all places? And then how did it make its way from Wilmington, North Carolina to South Florida, to become part of the Goombay Festival, which if you're in South Florida, you know about the Goombay Festival. So that's what I'm looking at. How do we make those connections? Because then what that would say to me is a lot of the people who may have started in North Carolina may have had their roots in the Caribbean. Like their ancestry may have started in the Caribbean and they may have been sold or dropped off in North Carolina. Because I know, just even from my family's history, I know that my North Carolinian relatives moved from North Carolina to South Carolina to Georgia, some of them, to eventually make their way to Florida. Because I grew up knowing about the Gullah Geechee from my mom. She would tell me about Gullah Geechee culture and all of that. But again, a lot of Gullah Geechee culture is Florida, some parts of Florida, mainly Georgia, and mainly South Carolina. So, just wanting to dig more into that and start tracing how these things came to be. Because I'm like, if this is a Bahamian cultural practice that's been going on for hundreds of years, then how does it get dropped off based on the narrative of the enslaved in the 1800s? How does it get dropped off into Wilmington, North Carolina, if it has its origins in the Bahamas? Something is missing there. So I would be interested in tracing that history. Well, this has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, Black Table Talk Edition, and I've been your host tonight, Shantae Charles. We will be back on the Daring Dialogues IG page tomorrow, and it'll be our Relationship Wednesday. So again, I want to thank you for taking time out to view. Please share this broadcast because I know there is something in this broadcast that you did not know about your own history before, because I didn't know. So we are always about learning here and learning something new. So if this encouraged you to go dig a little bit deeper, go study, maybe add Kwanzaa to your holiday traditions this year, check it out. It's not a religious holiday. From my understanding, it's really about the family values that you want to instill with your family. So this has been another episode. I want to thank you for your time and attention. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So continue to go out and be what, Pastor Ben?
Light.
Be light. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much, and God bless.